Hello, this is Inga. Welcome back to my kitchen. I actually came back from Denver, Colorado not too long ago, and I brought back some things with me. Specifically, I brought back a few cuts from a local butcher shop I visited when I was in town, and I actually carried them back in this little freezer bag to make sure that it got back safe and sound. I'm someone who doesn't really frequent butcher shops a lot outside of the ones in Chinatown where I feel like I'm a little more well versed, so I think the experience can be a little bit intimidating, which is why I went and asked these owners of Western Daughters, the butcher shop I visited, for a little bit of advice. Hi Kate, thank you for having me here. Can you tell me just a little bit more about your shop?
We're Western Daughters Butcher Shop, and we are a whole animal butcher shop, so we do all of our own butchery in-house, and we source 100% grass-fed beef and lamb, pasture-raised pork and chicken, and we work directly with farmers and ranchers. We have been around for 8 years, and we really believe in the way that we source meat. All of our food is coming from rural areas, but here in the city, we don't understand those stories of farmers and ranchers. And it was really driven with a big conservation mindset. They really start with what's great for the soil. And what's funny about those practices is that it ends up resulting in a really delicious steak.
I feel like you really do put a lot of thought and consideration in even just from that first initial step, right, which is so important.
It's really about building that relationship, getting to see their practices and the way that they raise their animals. And as farmers ourselves, we have a really good idea of what we're looking for that we get to share then with our customers when they come in to get a steak.
What's kind of the advice you would give to somebody who has never been to a butcher shop?
I think there is something really intimidating about going into a butcher shop for the first time. I think most of us are accustomed to buying meat from a grocery store and not from another person. And there are a lot of cuts that you might not have seen in the case. And that can feel like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I want or what to get. And I think the first thing is to just go in and to feel comfortable asking questions. You should be able to ask your butcher where they're sourcing their meat from. And you should be able to talk about what you like in a steak. There is no wrong thing to order because the right thing is what you enjoy. What we like in food is really individual, and we want to create space for everybody to feel welcome and to feel like they can find a steak that they love. And so here at Western Daughters, we really love to lead people through sort of a verbal flow chart.
Let's talk about it. What do you think that I should bring home?
Well, I think that depends on how you want to cook. And so my first question to you is going to be, do you want to cook something hot and fast in a pan, or low and slow, sort of for more time?
I'm gonna say low and slow.
Do you like something a little bit fattier, or do you like something a little bit leaner?
Ooh, I kind of like the fatty.
When you do low and slow, are you looking for something to pull apart, kind of like into taco meat or braised meat, or are you looking for something to be sort of a pot roast?
Pot roast.
I love the direction this went in because it really surprised me. I would recommend a chuck-eye, and so that's going to be a part of the shoulder, the upper shoulder, that has really beautiful marbling, and it really breaks down into a pot roast well because it's unctuous and it has some connective tissue, so you get that gelatinous, methionine goodness.
I feel like I'm playing a game,
It's choose your own adventure steak story.
Exactly. I love it. What if I went with the hot and fast?
I love hot and fast, and cooking a steak in a cast iron skillet is one of our favorite ways to go here. Do you want something tender or something with a little bit more tooth?
Well, I really like the ribeye cut usually.
Okay, so something a little bit more tender.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also like things that are a little bit fattier, like that ribeye cut?
Yes.
Awesome, I have the perfect steak for you. So I would go with a flat iron, which is going to be a very tender, it's the second most tender muscle in a steer's body. And it has this beautiful sort of lacy fat that goes through it. And it just cooks up hot and fast perfectly.
Amazing. So normally I would always go for the ribeye, and I don't really look at the other ones because I'm like, I know I love this.
Yeah.
So now I'm very excited to cook this. I actually just think it's the first time I'm cooking a flat iron steak.
It's really fun to get to try something new. And I think especially when we're talking about supporting farmers and ranchers, I want you to enjoy that steak so that you come back to support them even more.
So yeah, now I'm back here in my kitchen with more than just one ingredient. A couple of ingredients actually, because I had a really hard time choosing, and you know what? The more the merrier. The more ingredients I have, the more I can experiment with, the more new dishes I can try. So here we go. The first thing I actually cooked with was the chuck roast. The chuck roast, as you can tell, is a rather large chunk of meat, but that makes it perfect for a slow cooking method like roasting it slowly in the oven, which is actually one of my favorite ways to cook because I really think that time in itself is sometimes the most important ingredient. The secret ingredient, if you will. The cut that I have is around roughly 2 pounds, and I just kept the roast tied up with twine so to make sure that the juices can be kept inside. I seasoned it fairly generously before I seared it around the sides to get it to that like beautiful golden brown. I like doing this because this process of like caramelizing the sugars in the meat and giving it that like wonderful crust on the outside, I feel like it really sort of amplifies the final flavor, the savoriness of it. So that's something I tend to always do when I'm making sort of like stews or something that like takes a long time. And on the other side, I was just doing some prep work with my vegetables. I got a variety of them, just prepping, peeling and chopping up some onions, shallots, garlic, radish, parsnip, and these gorgeous rainbow carrots that I found. I chose radish and parsnip in particular because I really like the sort of like natural sweetness they have that they can lend to the stew or sauce that I'm making. Had to get those. And then I just tossed them around gently in some butter that was actually slightly browned by the time I put them in the pot, so I did get a little bit of that nutty flavor completely by coincidence. Then I added in a lot of tomato paste and deglazed it with some red wine. This is actually how I make my go-to red sauce for pasta, so that part at least felt familiar. And then I just tossed in some rosemary and bay leaf just to spice it up a little bit. And you can see that the consistency of the base so far is kind of like a thick paste. That's when I put in my seared chuck roast on the very top. And then instead of adding water, I decided to add the bone broth that I also got from Western Daughters. Bringing this back to New York, I will say, was a tricky thing because it is a liquid, but thankfully it was frozen solid still when I brought it through security, so I was very glad that it made it here safely. This broth though was something that I was very excited about because it is simmered in-house for 48 hours and it is like wonderfully jiggly and gelatinous. It's a little less obvious here because I had to reheat it a little bit more, but you can still see some of it actually in like ice form in the corner here. But yes, very excited for this broth and the things it would do for my dish. And then after that, I just let it cook in the oven at a low temperature for maybe 3 hours or so, kind of like winging it and like checking on it every now and then. I also seasoned it halfway and tossed in some mushrooms just to add to the texture of the dish. More things to eat, why not? And it came out wonderfully. The chuck roast had this signature like tender melt in your mouth texture, and the braising liquid, if we can call it that, the sauce, oh my goodness, that beef broth combined with the wine, the sweetness of the vegetables, they've now been slowly reduced to this like very rich and savory, wonderfully beefy flavor. And the texture of it was just so velvety. So I made the wise decision to eat it with some toasted bread so I could dip it in there, let it soak up all that like amazing, wonderful goodness. And it was just such like a satisfying, comforting meal, and that sort of like richness is something I feel like is very hard to replicate without putting in all that time. And again, that bone broth really did wonders. I also had this on like a rainy day and it was just the quintessential comfort food, I think. It was really great. And then because I had so much left over the next day and actually the couple days after, I used some of this leftover pot roast to make pot roast pasta. This is actually something I do a lot at home where I kind of just do like a spin-off of a dish using usually like whatever I have left over from the meal before. And so at one of the farmers markets in Denver, I actually ended up getting this basil garlic fettuccine that was locally made that I thought would pair really well with my red sauce based pot roast. And you can see here too that the sauce is kind of solidified overnight in the fridge because of all that gelatin, collagen from the bone broth. And as flavorful as this pot roast base sauce was already, I also like adding some soy sauce and Worcestershire sauce to give my pasta sauce a little boost of umami before finishing it up with some pasta water, cooking it down so that the sauce really clings to the pasta and you get like wonderful flavor in every bite. And truly plating this up, like finishing it with like a little twirl, a few more spoonfuls of sauce, and a sprinkle of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano, and you basically get like a whole new meal that is still really, really good. I could have eaten so many plates of this. Again, the pot roast in itself was already packed with flavor. This was like an even more concentrated version of that. This is just like one of the fun things I do at home, I guess, where if I make a big pot of something, I usually end up doing spin-offs of it. Just so many things you can do with leftovers. Moving on to the steak, which was another item that I was really looking forward to. As I told Kate, I usually just go for ribeyes when it comes to eating steak. And so this time I was like trying something new for once. So I made sure to pull the cut out a few minutes prior to cooking it in my cast iron pan that I actually coated with some beef tallow that Kate had packed for me. As expected, cooking it in beef fat, just watching that like beef tallow melt and like smelling that sort of aroma in the kitchen was just an experience in itself. And actually, Kate also gave me some quick tips on how to best enjoy this specific cut. She gave me this like really cool trick that can help me determine the readiness I wanted it at.
So if you take your hand and you relax it, and this is important, and you feel this muscle right below your thumb, so that's rare. And then if you just touch, not squeeze, your forefinger and thumb together, you can feel it tighten a little bit. That's medium rare. Then I'm gonna move to my middle finger. That's medium. Ring finger, medium well. Pinky finger, well done. And so what you're gonna do when you're looking for the doneness of your steak is you're just gonna kind of poke your steak and you're gonna feel whatever doneness you want here on this muscle.
I like to enjoy my steak medium rare usually. I tried to test this method out where I was like doing that little test with my fingers and my palm. And I want to say it's actually quite effective. I also forgot to film seasoning the steak, but I promised I did not too long after I put it in the pan. And then while I was resting the steak, I also really quickly sauteed some broccolini in some leftover beef fat. And on the side, I actually also made some quick roasted smashed potatoes, little baby potatoes that I then coated in a honey mustard garlic sauce with a few leaves of fresh basil and rosemary. I just thought it would be like a nice little side dish to complement our steak. As recommended too, I sliced the steak up fairly thinly to help with the texture of each bite and finished it up with some flaky salt. Very, very simple, very straightforward, but I actually feel like it's been a while since I cooked a steak this way. I feel like my go-to now is just like the reverse sear method, but I really liked how this turned out. Because this is grass-fed beef, I did get more of that like distinct meatier flavor that I was enjoying in like its most purest form. And because it's sliced so thinly, it doesn't end up being like too tough. It's actually very well balanced. It was a wonderful, simple dinner. This was really quite the exciting journey. I feel like I learned a lot along the way, as usual. I loved being able to experiment with cuts that I maybe normally don't go for at the grocery store. And I actually really enjoy the idea of just like bringing back ingredients with me. It's like bringing a piece of the city back with me and that I can just have fun with in my kitchen. Also now I feel a lot less intimidated about the idea of going to buy something from an American butcher shop. So I hope this experience has also helped you a little bit, given you some good tips. And other than that, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!